looking forward to performing Turning in Time. It'll be next Sunday already, coming up very soon, June 20th. It's been such a joy to get to know your music a little bit. And I was recently actually, I came across a piece you wrote on New Music, what was it? New Music USA,
Right.
about Turning in Time, which I thought was fascinating. It gave me a little insight into you as a composer and this piece a little bit further. So I was wondering if maybe you just wanted to start off like chatting a little bit about, you know, how this piece came to be, why you wrote it, and we'll go from there.
Okay, sure. I was asked to write this piece and by Kinga Augustin, a violinist. And when I first, as I often do when I first hear that I'm going to be writing for a specific artist, you know, I listen to their music and I see what strikes me most about their playing. And I kind of splash in and do a few phrases of first inspiration. So it was after that I spoke to Kinga about what she was looking for. And to my surprise, it was something that referenced the Bach chaconne. And while I was delighted and excited that this would then mean a piece of depth, which is I'm into, it was also daunting once I started about doing it. And I'd already splashed in with these phrases that seemed to be part of the piece, but they were more rhapsodic and not anything really to do with Bach. So, and I was on a deadline. So, you know, I was like, I want to use those phrases. But, you know, I was willing to let that go if that's what came to be. So I quickly decided not to write a chaconne. I wanted to do something that would honor Bach and not belittle this project. So I studied up and got the score, listened, and I looked for the patterns. I mean, I was really mystified and in wonder about how he gets this amazing sense of organic development in general, but also in a chaconne form, which is more of a repeated harmonic pattern, and how it all just adds up to more than the sum of the parts and just feels such like a cosmic truth by the end. And that's what I wanted to emulate if possible. So that's what I was going for. And I found some interesting patterns. I mean, I think I learned a lot as a composer from this in-depth study. I saw that he organized things in pairs of phrases. So there'd be two phrases and then the next two, and so they proceeded. And but the variations would be just a trickle, a little slight variation that came at the end maybe, or somewhere in that two phrase pattern. And then he would develop that element. And he kept on like that pretty religiously, so to speak, until he didn't. You know, sometimes he'll just break the pattern with an aberration, which I think is great. I mean, that's how evolution happens anyway, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, so I mean, I've always been fascinated and mystified by Bach. I mean, and the fact also that he called himself a musical scientist, and you know, like, what does that mean? You know, so for me, it took a little bit more discipline to kind of say, okay, I'm going to create a form here, and I'm going to stick with it, but I can always do that little aberration, you know. So some of his processes I used more than the strict form that he did. And my phrases ended up being three phrase sets, more like a blues pattern, really. It kind of fell into that. And then I had also sketched some chorale-like phrases. And so it turned out I was able to kind of put them in conversation with these more 21st century parts, and it all worked out as kind of a conversation between his time or his music and our time.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you. That's so well said, so beautifully said. And I think you talk about all the things that I find so compelling about your piece and its relation to the chaconne, but also kind of its independence of it. You know, it's very clearly, you know, your own voice. You're not trying to replicate anything, which I think is great. And I did write down one of my favorite phrases from this piece that you wrote about on New Music USA, and you said, "I think of Turning in Time as a conversation between then and now, or our time and Bach's time." And I think what you just said really kind of sums that up, and you can find so many different elements of that. Your composition and compositional style, something that I'm, you know, still kind of getting myself acquainted with, is encompassing of a lot of different styles. So you're a classically and jazz trained pianist, is that correct?
Yes.
Yep. And there are a lot of other kind of influences in your playing, and so and your writing. And I'm really interested in kind of the jazz piece, because you also talked about this briefly just a moment ago, how there's like this blues element and structure that enters Turning in Time. And I found that you did that really kind of seamlessly. And sometimes when you're mixing styles like that in a piece, sometimes it can be jarring, but I think you've done it really beautifully. So I was wondering if you want to just talk a little bit about these different influences in your life and bringing that together in your music.
Sure. I think I heard certainly blues early on. I was born in Detroit, but we moved soon after that to Atlanta, Georgia, and there's a big jazz and blues scene there. So I kind of grew up hearing a lot of blues, maybe even more so than jazz, and vocal blues, and so it's always been kind of in my ear. But then it was after being a piano major at Mannes that I later took jazz piano lessons with Mike Longo, a wonderful teacher. And so I learned to swing and I learned to play. I do it mostly for my own enjoyment. I'm less of a seasoned player than most people at my age stage, but I love that I can do it, and I love that it's part of my vocabulary, and it certainly taught me a lot about harmony and voicings and resonance and how rhythm affects the resonance. So, you know,
yeah,
I'm glad that I did that.
Yeah. Well, there's definitely, you know, in this piece in particular, there's like a rhythmic element, of course, that comes from the chaconne structure, but you've kind of taken this kind of dotted rhythm and made it your own by including these quintuplet figures and that sort of thing. So the rhythmic element I find as I'm kind of going through it as a performer is, you know, it's really the kind of baseline of like how I'm, of course, kind of structuring all the phrases and finding the gesture from the rhythm, which is really fun for me. So.
Great. Well, you know, I also have a background in Dalcroze Rhythmics. A lot of people haven't heard of that.
I have heard of it, but I don't know. So could you give me a crash course?
Yes. Well, Dalcroze, it's a method of music education, really, and learning, where you experience things first and then later learn to analyze them. But it's taught through music and movement. So, and in the process of all of this is a sense of I learned a lot about flow and momentum in music. So that's certainly a focal point anytime I'm writing, you know, whether I want to work with the flow or against it, or how I want to interweave those things. So it's very important to me. And sometimes I even move to the music and see what my body wants to do. So this dance, you know, I find it appropriate that you put it on your music and dance, or I think that's what the title is.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, that's amazing. I remember one of the most memorable lessons I had when I was, you know, an undergraduate student at New England Conservatory. I studied with Lucy Chapman. I don't know if you know who she is, but it was one of like our first lessons, and we were working on a movement of Bach. And, you know, straight away she started having me kind of walk dance to the rhythm around the room, and I was like, what is going on, you know, while playing. But it stuck with me ever since, because you really do, you know, even in the structure of something like a chaconne, which is very slow moving, of course, like you do have to feel that flow, you do have to feel that movement, and it's not a stationary thing.
Yes, yes. Sometimes in the classes that I took, we would walk the phrase, you know, use the room as a point, you know, make it across the room within the phrase. It just gives you a sense of, you know, just like conducting can give you a sense of the flow of the beats.
Absolutely. Yeah. Something to think about as performers, and as well as kind of teaching in that realm. That's really, really fascinating. Well, great. So thank you so much for this. And I really look forward to performing Turning in Time next weekend, and hope to see more of your music around and play more of it soon.
It'd be wonderful. Thank you, Audrey. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to it too.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks so much.
All right. Bye for now.